Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking at something really fundamental, I think, to how you experience the world and yourself, your emotions.
hmm
We've gathered some, well, pretty interesting perspectives on why you might hide what you're feeling inside and, what the impact of that can be.
Yeah.
Our aim today is really to unpack these ideas a bit and see what they reveal about, well, your inner life.
It's a big topic. Maybe consider this. Imagine a chameleon, right? But it's in a glass enclosure,
Okay.
and it changes its colors constantly. Not really to blend in, but more to reflect whoever's looking at it.
Like mirroring the audience.
Exactly. Now, what happens when the audience leaves? Can it still remember its original colors, its actual hue?
Yeah, that's a really potent image.
It is, and it connects to some of these ideas we've been looking at. It points towards something we could maybe call emotional mimicry. How you subtly shift your emotional expressions to fit what you think others expect.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About all those times you might suppress what you genuinely feel. Maybe anger, at work, or sadness when you feel like you have to be the strong one.
Or even disappointment when you're trying to be supportive for someone else.
Right. And it seems these feelings don't just disappear. They can become this hidden part of you, almost like a shadow, as one viewpoint put it.
A shadow self.
And the really thought-provoking part is, whether doing this means you might actually lose touch with who you authentically are.
Yeah.
So I guess the core question is, why do you even do this? Why hide?
Well, that brings us to how your mind actually organizes all the information it gets, all that sensory input.
Okay.
There's this principle where your attention naturally grabs onto certain things. Let's call that the figure.
The main focus.
Right, and other elements just sort of recede into the ground, the background. What's fascinating is that the same thing seems to happen with your emotions. Feelings that are uncomfortable, maybe vulnerability or fear,
Yeah, those tricky ones.
they often get pushed into that background, relegated.
Okay, I think I know what you mean. It's like
Yeah.
maybe you congratulate someone on getting a promotion, you're genuinely happy for them on the surface. But underneath, there's that little flicker, that twinge of envy, maybe just a quick, why not me
Yeah.
thought.
Right, that envy is the figure for a moment.
But almost instantly, your mind just grabs onto something else, what you're having for lunch, the next email you need to send,
Anything else?
anything, just
Yeah.
to take the edge off that uncomfortable feeling. So the envy, the figure, gets shoved into the background. It's like a kind of internal emotional camouflage.
That's a good way to put it, camouflage.
It might protect you from feeling bad right then, but you do have to wonder, what are the longer term effects for you personally?
Well, consistently doing that, pushing emotions into the background, it can lead to a kind of fragmentation of your experience.
Fragmentation. How so?
If you're constantly shielding yourself from certain feelings, you're basically limiting your access to the full spectrum of your own humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it often happens unconsciously. It's usually not this deliberate, I shall now suppress my envy decision.
Right, it's more automatic.
Much more like an invisible hand just rearranging your inner world without you even noticing it's happening.
Which is, yeah, a little unsettling when you think about it. You might find yourself reacting in certain ways or just feeling this general unease, and you can't quite figure out why.
Exactly. It's like some pieces of your inner puzzle have gone missing and you're not even sure when they dropped out.
There's a really insightful way someone put this, using that vase face illusion. You know the one?
Oh yeah, the vase face. That's a perfect metaphor here.
How does that work in this context?
Well, you look at that single image, right? And depending on where you focus your attention.
You see either a vase or two faces looking at each other.
Precisely. But the crucial point is both interpretations exist at the same time in the image. You just can only perceive one at a time. Suppressed emotions seem to work like that for you. They aren't truly gone. They're still there, latent, just waiting for a shift in your attention maybe to come back to the surface.
And the potential problem, as these ideas suggest, is when this suppression becomes like your default setting, a habit.
Yes. That's when your emotional landscape can get quite rigid. Certain emotions are just always in the background, never really getting looked at.
And that can really mess with your relationships, right?
Yeah,
And just your sense of who you are.
absolutely. For instance, if you constantly push down anger, you might find it incredibly difficult to set healthy boundaries with people.
Or if you always avoid feeling joy, maybe because it feels undeserved or something.
You might unknowingly sabotage your own happiness, prevent yourself from fully experiencing good things.
It seems this whole tendency to hide feelings comes from this tension between needing to be authentic, true to yourself.
And the very real need you have to adapt, to fit into social norms, meet expectations.
And wow, in today's world, that tension feels amplified, doesn't it? Especially with social media everywhere.
Oh, definitely. There's this immense pressure often to present this idealized self, this highlight reel.
Where vulnerability is kind of discouraged or seen as weakness.
Right, but here's a really interesting counterpoint to consider. The very fact that you have to suppress these emotions, that actually reveals their power, doesn't it?
Say more about that.
Well, if these feelings were truly insignificant, why would you need to put so much effort into hiding them? Why bother?
That's a key insight. Their persistence, even when hidden, shows they carry something important. Valuable information, maybe.
Messages from your deeper self, perhaps, that you're hesitant to listen to. That pang of envy we talked about. Maybe it's not just negative.
What else could it be?
It could actually be signaling a deeper desire for your own growth, or for recognition, or maybe a need for change in your own path.
So by silencing the emotion, you might also be silencing the insight it offers you.
You could be, yeah.
It really reframes how you might look at those uncomfortable feelings. They're not enemies necessarily. They're more like messengers.
Messengers, exactly. Even if they're delivering difficult news sometimes. There's this concept of an emotional field that relates to this.
An emotional field, like a space within you.
Kind of. Imagine your mind as this dynamic field where emotions are constantly rising, falling, interacting. And there's this idea that every experience naturally seeks completion, like a cycle.
Okay, a natural flow.
But when you suppress an emotion, you interrupt that flow, you stop the cycle. And that creates what we might call unfinished business.
Unfinished business, that sounds like it lingers.
It does. It suggested these unresolved emotions, anger you didn't express, grief you didn't fully process, maybe even joy you stifled. They retain a kind of psychic charge.
Like static cling. Or an unread notification on your phone.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Even if you're not actively looking at it, it's still there. Subtly pulling at your attention, maybe draining a bit of energy. These unresolved things hang out in the background, influencing your thoughts, your behaviors.
In ways you might not even be aware of.
Often, yes. Consider projection.
Okay, like seeing your own stuff in other people.
Exactly. That tendency you might have to attribute your own unwanted feelings onto others. If you're suppressing, say, feelings of inadequacy.
You might be hypercritical of inadequacy in others.
You might be. Or see it where it isn't even there. It's as if the suppressed emotion is trying to find some outlet, even a distorted one, in the outside world.
So what's inside you is actually shaping how you see the world out there.
It absolutely can, which connects to this idea of wholeness, right? That sense of being integrated, unified within yourself.
And suppression disrupts that wholeness.
That's the idea. It creates a kind of dissonance, a gap between what you're truly feeling inside and what you're showing on the outside.
Which could lead to feeling alienated, cut off.
Yes, not just maybe from others, but from your own authentic self. Become fragmented, living a life that doesn't quite match your inner reality.
And even though hiding feelings feels like a very personal, isolating thing, you mentioned interconnectedness within this emotional field.
Right. Even an emotion you're actively suppressing still affects the whole system. It's like back to the vase-face illusion.
How so?
Well, even when you're focused on the vase, the shapes of the faces are still there, defining the edges of the vase. Their absence or background presence still shapes what you see.
Ah, I see. So a suppressed emotion, even though hidden, still shapes your overall experience. Its absence is a presence, in a way.
That's a really insightful way to put it for yourself. Hiding feelings isn't just a private act. It sends ripples through your whole emotional landscape. Think about guilt.
Okay. Uncomfortable. Definitely something you might suppress.
Right. But guilt often signals that your actions aren't aligned with your values. If you ignore it, push it down.
You don't fix the underlying issue.
Exactly. And that suppressed guilt can then subtly color your interactions, maybe make you defensive or avoid certain people until you finally acknowledge it.
There's also this concept mentioned of contact, engaging fully with the present.
Yes, precisely. Full engagement with your present experience, what's happening inside you and around you right now.
And emotional suppression is basically the opposite of that. It's avoidance, disconnection.
It really interrupts that full contact. When you push an emotion away, you're also cutting yourself off from the valuable information it holds about your needs, your desires, your boundaries.
The things you need to know to navigate life authentically.
Right. And here's an interesting paradox. The more you try to control your emotions by suppressing them,
The less control you actually have.
in the long run, quite possibly, because those suppressed feelings can end up erupting unexpectedly. They have been allowed a healthy outlet.
Like holding a beach ball underwater.
Exactly like that. It takes constant effort, and eventually, pop, it comes flying out, maybe with even more force.
So the attempt at control leads to losing control.
That's really important to think about for yourself. Now, these ideas also talk about attention, don't they? How focus shapes what's figure and what's ground.
Yes, attention is crucial. It acts like a lens, highlighting certain parts of your experience, pushing others back.
So suppressing an emotion involves actively redirecting your attention. Focusing on something safer, maybe.
Or more acceptable, yeah. But these shadows, the things you push away, they don't vanish. They can actually gain a kind of potency in the periphery.
And where do these patterns of attention come from? What you focus on, what you avoid?
Often they stem from early conditioning. Messages you received, maybe subtly or overtly, about which feelings were okay to show and which ones weren't. Big boys don't cry, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. If you learned early on that sadness was weak, you might automatically push it away without even thinking.
Precisely. But the hopeful part here is that you have the capacity for change. For what's sometimes called insight.
Insight. Like a sudden understanding. Yes, that aha moment. A sudden shift in perception where the pieces just click into place. Your emotional landscape kind of reorganizes itself.
You can't really force that, can you?
Not usually, no. But it often happens naturally when you allow those suppressed elements to finally surface, maybe in therapy, maybe in quiet reflection. It's like the fog lifting, and suddenly you see yourself and your feelings more clearly.
So to encourage those moments for yourself, the suggestion is, instead of avoiding those tough emotions, approach them with curiosity.
Curiosity is the key.
Yeah.
Asking yourself, okay, what is this feeling actually telling me? What need might be underneath this anger or this sadness?
Instead of just judging it or trying to get rid of it.
Exactly. That begins the process of reintegrating those fragmented parts, moving towards that sense of wholeness we talked about.
But it's probably not always easy, right? This reintegration.
Oh, definitely not. It often involves confronting contradictions within yourself, learning to sit with discomfort, and accepting that emotions are complex. They don't always fit into neat little boxes.
It sounds like maybe within each of these suppressed emotions, there could be a kind of hidden gift waiting for you.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. Self-compassion hidden beneath shame, perhaps. Assertiveness within anger. The potential for healing within grief.
So by acknowledging and integrating them, you're actually unlocking valuable resources within yourself, gaining a deeper self-understanding.
You really are, but it does take courage, doesn't it, for you to face what you've been avoiding, to step out of that comfort zone of suppression.
Which brings us right back to that central paradox, doesn't it? The trade-off, seeking emotional safety through suppression versus the potential freedom that comes with authenticity for you.
It's that constant balancing act in your life. You want safety, you want to avoid pain, who wouldn't? But what's the cost to your true self?
It seems like hiding emotions, while it might feel like a strong move.
It ultimately leads to a loss of that authenticity, a disconnect.
And there's a powerful counter idea here, suggesting that vulnerability, the very thing you might fear, could actually be a source of strength.
A transformative power, even. By allowing yourself to be seen, flaws and all, you disrupt that pressure cooker of perfection. You actually invite real connection.
So vulnerability isn't weakness. It's more like a threshold.
A threshold to deeper understanding, yes. When you embrace vulnerability, you allow that figure ground shift we talked about. Hidden patterns can come into the light. You gain emotional insights that feel, well, really profound. Soul level, almost.
There's another metaphor used. Like a tree growing in a confined space.
Ah, yes. Its growth gets stunted, twisted, right? It adapts to the limited space, but it doesn't flourish.
So suppressing emotions helps you adapt to external constraints, maybe social expectations.
But it diminishes your vitality, your aliveness. The question then becomes, are you willing to break free from those constraints in your own life?
And true authenticity, for you, it's not just letting everything hang out all the time, is it? Or being rigidly conforming either.
No, it's much more nuanced. It's that dynamic balance. Discerning when and how to express what you feel while staying true to your inner experience. It connects back to that idea of healthy contact or engagement, being present without being totally overwhelmed or completely shut down.
And that unfinished business, those unresolved emotions, They're not just sitting there passively.
Not at all. They're actively shaping your present, your future, influencing your choices, your relationships, often unconsciously. And they often hold the keys to your deepest desires.
How so?
Well, maybe beneath chronic anger lies a deep desire for justice. Beneath persistent fear, a longing for connection and safety. Beneath shame, a fundamental need for acceptance.
Wow. So confronting them is really about understanding your deeper needs and desires.
It can be, but it's a journey, right? Confronting those suppressed parts can feel daunting, like stepping into a dark forest, maybe.
Yeah, sounds about right. Uncertain, maybe scary.
But the idea is that the darkness itself can be fertile ground. That's where insight can grow. You kind of have to trust the process even when you can't see the path clearly.
And ultimately, you can choose differently. Like that chameleon deciding to stop performing.
Right. Choosing to explore its own true colors, whatever they may be, becoming more alive, more authentic, and maybe, in doing so, inspiring others too. Authenticity isn't a destination. It's more like an ongoing practice, aligning inside and outside.
So what's the cost of not doing this? Of staying in that state of self-deception?
Well, the perspective is that you limit your engagement with life. You trade depth for a kind of superficial safety. And on a larger scale, maybe this contributes to a wider culture of disconnection.
Whereas embracing your emotions, even the difficult ones,
Has the potential to create positive change within you first, and maybe rippling outwards.
So the final big question to ponder in your own life seems to be, can you reconcile authenticity and adaptation? Is it possible to honor your true self while navigating all the complexities of social life?
Maybe the answer isn't choosing one over the other, but finding a way to integrate both. Finding some kind of harmony within that inherent tension. It's certainly something to think about.
It really is. A lot to consider for yourself. It seems the emotions you tend to hide, they aren't just burdens after all. They hold so much potential, wisdom, truth, a way to understand yourself more deeply.
Suppressing them really does seem to dim your inner light, doesn't it?
Yeah, while embracing them. That feels like where you truly start to shine.
So maybe think about that question in your own life. Where are you currently adapting? What colors, so to speak, are you displaying right now? And are they really yours?
This deep dive into emotional suppression and awareness, it's really just scratching the surface for you, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's a starting point. We'd encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, maybe revisiting those concepts like figure ground, unfinished business, and that surprising power of vulnerability. What really stood out most for you from all this? What resonated?